Hey, this is Jordan. This month's XDA Developer TV is brought to you by the Samsung Smart App Challenge 2012. Enter for your chance to win your piece of over $4 million in cash prizes by clicking the banner at the top of xdadevelopers.com or by visiting developer.samsung.com. Well, I just returned from a week-long vacation. It's been a long couple of days of driving, so let's do a very quick weekend recap. We had a bunch of excellent Samsung Galaxy S3 news from this weekend. As of now, officially, all of the US Samsung Galaxy S3 variants have been rooted. And the thanks for that go to XDA Senior member HowToMen for doing the AT&T version, and XDA Forum member Cypher0 for the T-Mobile and Sprint versions. And it's actually thanks to XDA Forum member DogSlayer69 that we know that the Sprint and T-Mobile versions are compatible. They're actually the same thing. And that method is actually building on XDA recognized developer NoobNL's original method for the Sprint version. Essentially, it just involves using Odin to flash a new kernel and ClockworkMod, and then using ClockworkMod to flash the root to it. The one thing I do see missing in all of this is Verizon, but I am sure that it's on the way as well. So I don't know how they can exactly say that all the US variants have been rooted, because Verizon one has not yet. As a follow-up to that, and sticking in the vein of the Galaxy S3, as we tend to do quite a bit here because there's been a lot of news coming out about it in the last few weeks, XDA Elite recognized developer Super Curio has outdone himself and released an application into the Google Play Store that essentially just sim unlocks the Samsung Galaxy S3 i9300 variant. Now this is the international version, so once you unlock it, and of course you have to have it rooted to unlock it, you can then take it to any other international carrier and you should be able to use it there. Additionally, thanks to XDA Senior Moderator and recognized developer mskip, the Galaxy S3 now has ClockworkMod Touch, so in addition to being able to root pretty much any Galaxy S3 and being able to sim unlock the international version, you can now have a touch-based version of ClockworkMod. And that's all the Galaxy S3 news for right now, moving on to other stuff. Now, as I talked about in the last video, Windows Phone 8 has been announced and people are all getting excited about it, so what's going to happen to Windows Phone 7? For a while now, you've been able to run .exe code on your Windows Phone 7 devices as long as they've been running custom ROMs that are specifically set up to run them. XDA recognized developer Heathcliff74 decided that was not good enough for him. Thanks to the help of XDA Elite recognized developer Cotula, they managed to get this same executable code running on stock unlocked ROMs. So what does this mean? Essentially, it means that you can make these applications without having to use Silverlight. It means that it should be easier to get other executables to run, not necessarily anything for the default Windows desktop type stuff, but things that you've compiled that don't have the full Silverlight wrapper around it. And realistically, one way or another, I think it's worth taking a look at the article just because the method used to make this happen is a very entertaining one. It involves reading through log files and error files and pulling out MD5 sums from these things and then making it all sort of tie back in. It's hard for me to put it all together because I need to go back over it and read it again myself, but definitely do go take a look at the article because it is a very entertaining process. And with that, we come to the last story I'd like to talk about, just to keep things sort of short and sweet, and we do wrap it up with a not-so-sweet story. Last time we talked about Linus Torvalds and what he had to say about Nvidia. Well, this time Nvidia fires back, sort of. You can tell it definitely came from a PR person and not particularly someone who knows a whole lot about how Nvidia has interacted with the Linux community. Pretty much there's a large press release with a couple of key points that they pointed out. They talk about how Linux users get day one support for all of the high-end GPUs. They support a wide variety of different GPUs on Linux, and they support a lot of ARM devices and have contributed significantly to the kernel. But as you read through the article, AdamOutler points out the differences in opinion that he has with the Nvidia PR people. For one, they talk about how they made their installer better and made it work better with Bumblebee, which is a complete open source creation, making the Optimus platform that Nvidia created work on top of Linux. Like I said, they talk about how they made their installer work with it, but their installer is closed source and it doesn't really do anything to work with Bumblebee. They also talk about how they choose to support Linux by using Nvidia common code rather than the Linux infrastructure, so that they don't have to do a bunch of extra work to make it work on every version of Linux that's available. Now that sounds all well and good, but essentially it just comes around to Nvidia wants to do things Nvidia's way for the sake of maintaining their edge in the market, if they have an edge in the market. And the big problem that I have with all of this is they go out of their way so many times in all of this to say how much they support Linux and how much they do for Linux. And then all the while they create a platform like Optimus that is completely unsupported on Linux by anyone at Nvidia. And they have come out multiple times in the past to say, by the way, if you use Linux and you have this Optimus hardware, screw you, we don't care. I mean, in all reality, when the community has to come forward and completely make something work for your product because you have chosen not to support it on Linux, you are not doing anything to help the Linux community. And as far as the significant contributions that they made to the kernel, they didn't really make all that many. Adam actually pointed out a link to GitHub where you can see exactly what was committed having to do with Nvidia. And from the way it looks like they're just doing these commits to try to make it look like they're putting a whole lot more into it so that it will be more enticing for Android developers to want to use them as their platform. Again, sort of pointing out that Nvidia is more a marketing company than an actual tech company and more interested in the bottom dollar than in actually supporting Linux and Android. And I will say, as a person who has owned the Optimus hardware in a laptop that I own for less than a month, a person that has owned multiple Nvidia graphics cards over the years, and a person that owns a Tegra 2 tablet that has no more support and will probably never have any more support for newer versions of Android, I'm going to take this little PR stunt that Nvidia has thrown out here and I'm going to ship it right back over to them and say, forget it, it's just not working. Put up or shut up unless you're going to come out and actually support the community and do some work and maybe even open source some things, then you can just take it and stick it. I am completely done with it. I've moved away from Nvidia here at home. I am now using AMD. Not to say that that's a whole lot better, but it is definitely a step in a different direction. One way or another, it really should not be about let's keep everything closed and tight and kept to ourselves because we have to have that competitive market edge. If you are supporting things on Linux, I think you really ought to be supporting things in an open, community-supported standard. That way, if something needs to be fixed and the NVIDIA developers cannot be bothered to do so, members of the community can step in and assist. That's not to say that every single thing that NVIDIA does should be fixed by the community. Optimus, for example, should not have been a community project. Bumblebee, as it turned out, should have been something that NVIDIA created. If they had to do something like this, NVIDIA should have been the one to do it. Anyway, I'm going on and on about this. Essentially, I'm not a huge fan of the way that NVIDIA runs their Linux technologies. And if you haven't read it, I would recommend taking a look at Adam's article on NVIDIA. I will have a link to that and all of the other things that I've talked about down in the video description. If you haven't seen it, Adam put out pro tip number 6, the effective use of NFC tags this weekend over on the website. But that is all from me for today. If you like this video, do make sure to hit the like button down below. And if you want to be notified when we put up new content, hit the subscribe button up above. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.